Who is now Father Ambrose, but he was in Etna, who actually became Father Seraphim's close disciple, and I met him, and it was very important for me to meet converts, because I thought they are people who have chosen orthodoxy out of nowhere. They've come, and it's very difficult. There was very little in English left, so there was him, and they suggested, there was a nun in Novodivieva, a good friend of my mother's, and she suggested, when we were going back to California, she suggested, you should, if you want to meet some missionaries, you should meet Father Herman and Father Seraphim. And so we arranged to meet them, and eventually that was it. That was, we were going to be going back to Novodivieva to be with Vladika Andrei, but when we met Father Herman and Father Seraphim, I was for one thing, anyway, it was, it was just an incredible fit. It was just God's timing was perfect, because they had no one up there. All the brothers had left for one reason or another over the years. And so that was in late 76, and we moved there in 77, because they said, well, to get your Orthodox roots, come for Great Lent. So the long and short of this, we were there for Great Lent, and then they asked us to stay. So it was absolutely wonderful. And so during that time, they were not just not only monks, but, as Father Andrei said, missionaries. That was their purpose, because Father Seraphim was a convert, and they were very interested in these, young Americans and all that kind of, and especially Father Seraphim had gone through, as you know, a very, very painful years of search, just intense. And once you've done that, and well, I'm sure that some of you have too, but when he felt, he felt that he had found the pearl of great price, and he wanted to, spread it for everybody. I mean, he wasn't that kind of, extrovert or anything like that, but he had a real gift, as you know, for writing and stuff like that. So they started the Orthodox Word, and we're going out. But when I came along, I was also interested in missionary work, and of course I didn't have his talents or something like that. But they decided, because Father Herman had graduated from Jordanville, and they had always dreamed of something in English, like Pravoslavne Rus. So that was what they suggested to me, and that became Orthodox America. But I have to say, I think I have to go way back, if I may. I'm not sure, since we're doing the sort of mission of Rokor and missionary work in Rokor. Is that correct, Father Ande?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So to go back to the last century, the century before, the 19th century, in the sort of mid 19th century, Russia was the language, in spite of the lack of missionary workers. And but Jordanville also came, and that was, of course, in the later 40s. I think, well, of course, Father Platina, they were in their 30s, but they came with the intention of, it was not only to be a monastic community or to serve some of the Orthodox around, but also a missionary community, and that's why they started Orthodox Life. And Father Joseph, who was one of the founders, Joseph, he knew enough English, and he was also had a driver's license, and so even some of the people here in the village remember the monks when they would come, like, to the gas station or something like that, and they would give them a loaf of bread and they just said it was wonderful. It was some of them remember the arrival of the cupolas by, I don't know, train or something like that, and they came. It was a big thing in the village. So, and these are missionary outreaches. There was a father, I think it was Father Galassi, who was it the beekeeper or the Father Gimmergale? I can't remember which one of the ones. I think it was Father Galassi, and he would, in the middle of the night, he would wake one of the seminarians and say, "We're going to go." And so he put a lot of, I don't know how he collected all these foodstuffs and things like that in bags, and he would go where he would know that there was I mean, it was just some family, didn't know, maybe somebody who needed something, and he would just deliver these food, and I don't, maybe that wasn't at the middle of the night, but still, he just tried to do this, all the, but they had some real good contact with the community here, and that was an outreach. But Orthodox life was Father Joseph would, if there was an American visitor or something, then he would say, American, oh, Orthodox life, and so you give them. So that was a missionary outreach. And then, of course, Pravoslavny Rus, there were so many Russians that came over, and they were also very concerned about those in the Soviet Union. I'm not sure, did Pravoslavny Rus, was that able to get into the Soviet Union at that time?
Not really until perestroika, not until perestroika.
Yeah.
Not until
I mean, it was more difficult for,
1980s.
I think, Russian journalists, because our Orthodox America, we sent them to, we didn't send very many, but I remember we sent to Pachayev, and we sent to Kiev Caves, Slavra, and I can't remember, I think
But still
St. Petersburg.
probably in the late 1980s. I don't think you sent. Did you send before?
No. 1980 was when we began.
Yeah. Jordanville also started to send out a lot of things in that time. At that time, yeah.
But I think also because it was American, because we were publishing. I'll show you just a few of these older. We were publishing also things about the suffering of the martyrs, those who were in prison, and had they really read them, I'm not sure that they would have gotten through. But it was, and we never knew that they were getting through until I think we heard from Pachayev. That was wonderful. And then here at the glorification, I think, of St. John, there was a monk that came up to me and asked whether I knew, it was Mary Mansur from Orthodox American. I said, well, he couldn't believe that I was, I looked very young, and I was pretty young then, but he just said that he was from the Kiev Caves, Lavra, and he just said it was read to shreds. Because that was the only information that they could give. So that was also like a missionary reach in English to Russia. But getting back to this country, then aside from Orthodox life, and I think living Orthodoxy started not too long before we did. I think that was from Tennessee. That was more like a booklet.
Right, but it's probably started after you, because I understand that Father Ambrose, Father Alexei Young, he started
Nicodemus.
Right.
Nicodemus. That was a little pamphlet that he started with under the with the help of Father Seraphim. Because he was also interested in missionary work, he was a former Roman Catholic, and so they had this little pamphlet, but it didn't have, the circulation was pretty limited, and it was, I went out once to help them with one of their issues, I think, and then, but Father Herman and Father Seraphim just said the time is ripe for something like Orthodox America. So in that time, I had no idea what to do, but as I said, all we had was a typewriter, an electric typewriter. Actually, Father Seraphim didn't even have an electric typewriter. He would, just peck. But they somehow they got an electric typewriter borrowed from somebody, and so they set me up in some place with the first couple issues. I was just traveling around with a backpack and going from one house, and then I would come back to Platina and live there, and I'd go to another house to somebody else's, in Reading or something like that. And then eventually they found there was a trailer in Platina down in the town, which that's electricity, and that was called the Platina Palace. But and I would just go there, but all of these, I mean, these are, as I said, I didn't have any experience with printing or I mean, my writing was still, I was just very painful for me to, just very difficult. But when we collected we would ask for editorials from we had the different various policies, and that was one that the a priest from Rocor would be writing an editorial, so we would, solicit some of these. But that soon stopped because it was very difficult to get, priests, and then we were on a schedule and it was hard. So Father Ambrose did a lot of them, and then I started that. And then, of course, there was the news about the New Martyrs page, but primarily it wasn't a newspaper. I mean, Orthodox Life had, various ukaze from the bishops, or who received an award or something like that. I wasn't interested in that whatsoever. So I wrote for myself. I wrote for what I thought was inspiring or edifying or informative for just the regular person. And somehow by God's grace, it somehow turned out well. And I think the thing is, just because my own background was also just from Rocor, that was my formation. I didn't even consciously think about it, but I think that helped in what I tried to transmit. Obviously had the Rocor spirit. It wasn't OCA. I mean, that started getting a little more different, but there were problems in the convert community, as like our Orthodox America was, in other words, a voice for Rocor, unconsciously or consciously, even outside of Rocor, because there were very few materials in English, and therefore even those people in the OCA or in other jurisdictions subscribed. In fact, a lot of them, I even, there was one priest who told me that it was very influential in drawing him to Rocor, because their newspapers were more on an official level. Although I think the Dawn from the south, from Bishop Dimitri, that was also very good, but he was a convert, so you can kind of tell. So let's see what I was going to say. So the English. So we had and then the other problem at that time with the English or the convert community, which I mean all across the states, was the monastery in Boston, and that, because it was in English, that was attracting a lot of people, because almost all of Rocor was in Slavonic, and so that was attracting a lot of people. And when they started going off, all these converts were in danger, and so that's why Father Herman and Father Seraphim worked very hard to steer them away, and to make our Rocor hierarchs understand, because they didn't, many of them didn't speak English, or they weren't fluent in English, so they just saw this Boston as a monastery, and actually Father Herman and Father Seraphim, at first they had a very nice positive article about the Holy Transfiguration Monastery, but later they felt the spirit was different. And that's what Father Seraphim, that was the whole thing with the correctness disease. And he was very concerned about that, almost more so than, in other words, this fanaticism or leaning to the right, too far to the right. And he would rather have somebody, break a couple rules and repent, rather than just sticking to the letter of the law. And that eventually, it wasn't just that, but the schism and it was very, very painful for many families, just split right down the middle. So, and a lot of other, and some parishes still, belong to them, or, it's very difficult, because he was, Father Pancini, the abbot there, was very charismatic, and that's dangerous. But
I think 1970s, 1960s, in Jordanville, they tried to follow the path of monk Clement Zedergolm in Optina. So Father Clement Zedergolm, he lived in the late 19th century Russia. He was of German descent. He was born in Russia, but sort of still he used to be Lutheran, right? Yeah. And kind of fathers at Optina told him that in order to become a good Orthodox, he would need to become Russian. They didn't mean that Russian would be superior, but they meant that Orthodoxy doesn't exist without a shape, without a form.
Yeah.
So he would need to basically to attach himself to this Russian cultural form. And that was my understanding that that's what we tried in Jordanville. Like if you think of Father Ianikios, if you think about those generation of converts, they, I wasn't here, of course, that's I would like to ask you, they try basically to say if you really want to get it, you would need to try to be as Russian as you can.
Yeah.
So what was, am I correct? What I am describing about Jordanville back then, was it there? What can you comment on this?
Oh, for Jordanville. Well,
Jordanville or elsewhere in the Russian Church abroad.
yeah, yeah. I suppose because America had such a, I think maybe like a superficial culture, and you need some kind of, it's a cultural context, I think, that they were talking about. And if you have an Orthodox country that has that context in it, or if you become acquainted with it, somehow the spirit of Orthodoxy can be conveyed in a way. Although I have to say that every country and every culture has its faults, and sometimes when somebody comes to Orthodoxy and they say this is the truth, it's the absolute, and they have it's very difficult for them to separate the idealized or the absolute truth of Christianity and God and Jesus Christ from the church that as it is, today, or even the church militant on earth. Because you read in the Russian past, and there are some terrible things. Some of the czars did awful things, and we're supposed to, or even in the Byzantine, the emperors and things like that. It was just disgraceful. You think, how could anybody who calls himself a Christian, act like that towards a fellow human being, let alone another Christian? It was so. I think there's a limit to that, and I remember that some of these parish halls have portraits of Gogol and Pushkin and these people, and it's very just like a Russian club, and so that's not good. But I know that it's interesting that when my father was on Mount Athos and he first encountered Orthodoxy, he went to both the Greek and the Russian monasteries, and it was interesting. At that time, he made notes, comparing the way they served and things like that. He didn't know anything, but he felt that the Russians had more warmth, and that's what really attracted him. That's why when he came to the States and he looked in the Yellow Pages, he looked for a Russian church. So there's something to be said about that also. Just that. If there's a softness there among the Russians, I think I'm not sure of you.
I'm thinking because his experience was maybe peculiar, since he dealt with Russians who were past their imperial prime time, who kind of felt exiles, who were left alone. But I mean, I'm not sure if he would come now.
Well, new Russians are different, I have to say.
No, even I would say new Russians, old Russians, he would, if he would have come before the Russian Revolution, he might also see different Russians, because when Russians felt that have the whole might of the Russian Empire behind them, be this now or then, it's different. Also, like Americans, if Americans feel they come from the US, they are number one, so they're different. And when it's US is, God forbid, humiliated, you kind of would feel different. So I think those Russians exiles, they kind of, when we are humble, we are more prone to embrace, to be more philosophical.
That's true. Yeah.
That's my reading
Compassion,
of this. That's my reading.
That could very well be. It's very difficult because we all have our individual experiences that we bring to life, and so, and of course, this whole idea of pre-revolutionary Russia has always been idealized, for us, for the emigres.
Kind of, since you said that, because I'm thinking about, I don't know if I'm thinking about why, like, I could have gone to a Greek parish at a certain point, but I didn't want to because I always, just from my perspective, felt the Greeks were so, we are like Orthodoxy, like we're Orthodoxy, like we invented it.
Oh.
We have all the best, we best theologian like that, and Slavic Orthodoxy, like Russians and Ukrainians and that. I like me as a convert, I always felt more comfortable just being around them. Maybe it's because things are going on in the countries like that. There's definitely a different kind of, but basically, I'm talking to Jordan, a different kind of spirit among Russians and Ukrainians in general. I just kind of felt more at home. And then even with like when I was going to like Ethiopian parishes, I felt also at home too. I don't know why, but I'm not thinking maybe because the Greeks are so big and so important that I felt like this is too much. This is out of But with the Russian church here is pretty small. Like Rokor is very small. And I know people in like Rokor that I just know because I know people that they know.
Oh, I see.
And so there's instant connection going on. Orthodox is extremely small in America, but in Rokor it's even smaller. So really just like a family to a certain extent. And then maybe come from Muslim background. I just like the Antiochians in general kind of style going on. But that's interesting. Now I'm thinking about it because I like Greek chant, but I think their like Russian chant is to me a little bit more. I feel more comfortable with it. That's interesting. My main experience with the Greeks was when I was abroad, and that was it was nice, but it was very small too. Not that many Greeks in the Czech Republic.
I think also the Greeks tend to be even more ethnic than the Russians. They've kept their identity, their Greek identity, I think, a little stronger, and I think it's more difficult for a convert to kind of move into that. I'm not sure. It really depends, I think, from parish to parish, and I think the coasts are more these ethnic enclaves. I think they have you think, I don't know, I would think.
Well, on the West Coast, it's flipped, and the Russians are more ethnic, and the Greeks are more
country-friendly.
Yeah. But it's basically, even the Russian church, it has more ethnic on both, the older.
That would make sense,
That's what I found. Like we talk about the California and like East Coast gives this all the time, and I've never been to California, but it does seem very different from the East Coast. Like just general feeling, it seems like. I think the West Coast seems to be more ethnic. It seems like when it comes to the big Russian parishes. I don't know if that's true, but that's people telling me that's what it seems like. East Coast, there's so many converts on the East Coast. It's kind of amazing, like even like race stuff, like being like the only black person in like a Russian parish doesn't feel that weird, to be honest. But then being a black person in a Greek parish might feel a little more weird. I feel like just from the conversation I had with people, and you never feel deeply uncomfortable. I've never felt uncomfortable really. When I was first in Orthodox, it was never something that
This is interesting. That also comes from some years ago. It's particularly, I think, on the East Coast because St. Vlad's, and there was a great animosity between the OCA, St. Vlad's OCA, and Jordanville. That kind of thing. So because we didn't particularly recognize them, and we even Father Herman would say, "Oh, those Shmemanites," something like that. And so you grew up with this prejudice. And furthermore, my older sister, went to an OCA parish. It was Father Thomas Hopko, and they were very nice, but it was my father even described it as a Protestantized Orthodoxy. So it was a little bit, they were trying to be, fit in to have an American church, American this. And I think that's why also Rokor is careful in preserving the Russian culture, because it doesn't want that feeling of just being sort of an Orthodox type of Protestant church. I mean, they had women came in pants, and that's not the worst thing. In fact, Father Stefan Pavlenko, I'm sure you've heard that. He went to this, the evangelicals that were not too far away from Ben Lomond. He visited the church, and it was during the weekday. I think it was during Lent or something like that. During the weekday service, and he saw it, and these women were here, and one of them I think was in shorts, and she was carrying a baby or something like that. And at first he just thought, oh, this was scandalized, just it's terrible. And then he thought to himself, and he said, how many people would we have going to a weekday service? Going through like that. He said, what's better? So it's an eye opener. So you have to, there are things that are more important than.
Right. Mary, I was attending Antiochian Parish in 2021 because of COVID for Holy Week, and people would be in church exactly as you described, kind of. People would ask you back then in California, what religion are you, because the way you look, kind of. And those people in Utica, in Antiochian church, they would be like regular people I would see at Walmart. No really special head covers, no length of their skirts. But basically my outcome from attending church was the same as it would be in Jordanville. Reverence, piety, to crucifixion, to Christ, kind of melodies. Basically, my takeaway from the service was the same as it would be in Jordanville. So kind of we were on the same page with those people, and they were just, I mean, humble people. They didn't look special. I never would ask them any question. What is your religion? Because it could be anything.
Yeah. I'm thinking about this. I shared this long article by Schmidt. Is really good because he talked about how, like Orthodoxy does have to have some kind of form. I mentioned earlier, because America has never had the kind of Orthodox history that most Orthodox countries have had, and so there is something missing there that is hard for Americans to kind of assimilate into and buy into. But at the same time, the question becomes, what do we want American Orthodoxy to look like?
Right.
Because if it's like the Protestantizing Orthodoxy that if that's what it's going to be, that's what it's going to be. But if it's going to be Russian American mix or Greek American mix, we have to decide, because there's too many. It's too much differences, and I think that's why American Orthodoxy hasn't been able to formalize or
find its own way,
find its ground, because it's because we're all fighting for a version of American Orthodoxy, and it's not organic necessarily. Like it's like in the OCA to a certain extent. I'm fine with the OCA, but I think there is a too much of a push a little bit to become completely American.
Right.
But in the Russians, there's too much of a push to preserve a culture that's completely foreign to Americans. We talk about this a lot. Like for example, like the monarchy. It's in America. It's not a thing that most Americans really care about, like having a czar, having a king.
Right.
We left the king of England, right? It's the whole thing. So in American psyche, it's not important. But for a lot of Russian people who come from that, who have this very tormented past, where it's very important when they're talking to people, they kind of want us to adapt that, and some people do. Like I do. I'm fine with it. But like it shouldn't be something that I think Americans have to deal with. Americans shouldn't have to become monarchists in order to become Orthodox. Even if you personally, that's the thing. It's like the politics too is what I think leads people to go to the OCA or Antioch. It's not.
I think politics should really just be completely out of it. And I think as more and more as the generations go on, of course you do have the new Russians, but they don't have any feeling towards the Tsar or something like that. So as the generations go on, you'll have people who have carried like the flavor of some kind of Orthodox or Russianness, but don't have that overwhelming sense of kind of ethnic. I think so that might help. Of course, Father Romanis has a completely different experience and different from a country that.
Well, I'll speak as an outsider. I observe America in a different way. I mean, it's not you're doing it wrong. I mean, I think you have to do what America should do is it should reflect on what aspects of your culture, so to say,
Yeah.
is that where orthodoxy can work on, like because we had this as you said, it's difficult for orthodoxy to, so to say, function without a cultural context. That's why we we go to Greek mindset,
Yeah.
a Russian concept, and we desire that we should have an American Orthodox Church,
Uh-huh.
which becomes frustrating for us because it ends up being a Protestant
Yeah,
Orthodox.
yeah.
So I think Americans should have that deeper understanding of themselves. And from my perspective, there's one good American. It's not a trait. It's a perspective. I mean, Americans are not afraid to go beyond the horizon.
Beyond what?
I mean, it's one part of your identity of all Americans is you're not afraid to do things which are beyond your horizon. That's why it's Americans who went to the moon. It's it's also Americans who are exploring this gender identity.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
going beyond your nature. It's part of your.
Yeah, just you know.
It's your thing.
Yeah,
I mean,
let's go west, young
yeah.
man. Oh, further.
I mean, if you can baptize that American trait,
Yeah.
get that put it in orthodoxy, that would, I mean,
Well, I think that the fact, like, trying out orthodoxy is an expression of that,
Yeah.
even.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think it's going to make miracles for orthodoxy in America.